Hi, hello, and welcome again everybody to another episode of Natural Juan. Yes, this is another video following the last one I just made. This means you're getting 2 videos today. That said, this, ladies and gentlemen, will be a video about the recent issue regarding a book in the Philippines called Isang Kaibigan, or A Friend in English, written by none other than incumbent Vice President Sara Duterte, daughter of former President Rodrigo Digong Duterte. Yes, this is the same woman who tried to protect Pastor Apollo Carrion Quiboloy, a proven cult leader akin to the likes of Jim Jones or Shoko Asahara, when he was finally arrested by the authorities recently, and called it unjust and cruel, even though the man has been involved with a lot of shady dealings, from human trafficking and sexual assault of children. She has even gone on to compare the said religious leader to suffering the same way Jesus did when he was crucified, which is a level of blasphemy worthy of something like the tabletop wargame Trench Crusade. Anyway, I need to say a couple of things before we get started, okay? I know I said that I would prefer to keep away from political topics as best I can. I don't want to make things worse than they already are. It's bad enough as it is, please and thank you. However, there are times when some things need to be said. This is one of those times. Next is that this is mostly a Filipino thing. I might mention stuff about other countries like J.K. Rowling or Stephanie Meyer, but for the most part, this will just be about us Filipinos. So if you're a foreigner and you can't really relate to the topic, I won't mind if you go and watch another video. That said, if this does seem interesting to you despite our social and political differences, you're welcome to stay and watch. I am well aware that some people like looking at actual traffic accidents and locomotive wreckage. I know that the developers of the science fiction horror game Dead Space got their inspiration for the design of their necromorphs, or space zombies for lack of a better term, from looking at car wreck victims, so this might be helpful to you in some way. At least, I hope it helps you in some way. Now please be quiet and pass the cheese popcorn. Sorry, I don't have any sour cream popcorn, but we do have beer. And rum. Okay, first off, for those of you who are curious, I will read to you the story of Isang Kaibigan, or A Friend, translated to English, so you'll at least be able to understand what this mess started with and what it is about to begin with. Isang Kaibigan, or A Friend, is a book written by Sara Duterte. Her name has no H, don't forget. And illustrated by Janina Simbilio and Joseph Callinger. For all Filipino children, or so the author claims. So the story begins. Beneath the green leaves of the banahaw tree hides a true wonder. It is Owl, a wealthy bird who owns a nest atop the branches of a mango tree. He is rich in terms of both food and friends, and his home is always open for happy gatherings with his friends crow, rail, pigeon, parrot, and many other birds. But then one day, a merciless storm came forth, destroying Owl's nest and everything he owned. Nothing was left but sorrow and starvation, and even the friends he once had vanished like bubbles. And in his loneliness, his very being was devastated by his ordeal. One day, while he was moping beneath the now leafless tree, a familiar shadow approached. It was Parrot, whose wings glittered with drops of rain, landed beside Owl. "Owl, my friend," Parrot said in a soothing voice, "storms are only temporary. I am here to help you rebuild your nest. While we're fixing your home, Why don't you come and live at my place for the time being? Together, we can wait for the regrowth of your beloved mango tree." Tears fell from Owl's eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. "Parrot," he said, "you are a true friend. Having a friend in the middle of a storm is more important than thousands of friends who are only there when times are happy." And even in the middle of hardship, two birds work together, not just to rebuild a nest, but also to prove that during times of need, a true friend will never disappear. The end. There's also a short blurb near the back of the book that introduces the author, Sara Duterte, to the reader, but I don't really want to elaborate on that too much right now. Overall, the book is meant for children or young readers at least. You can tell that by just looking at the cute characters and relatively simple plot of the book. That said, my issue with this is that despite its simplicity, there are a number of things to consider first. While it does seem simple at first, there are words and themes that may seem too difficult for young readers. Namely, words like kagutuman, which translate to starvation, and nabagbag, which translates to devastation. I suppose that if Warhammer 40,000 was ever translated to Tagalog, you'd have to call devastators tagabagbag or something similar, but I digress. The use of these words might be a little too much for kids, not to mention being kinda a little too dark. Another thing to consider would be the glaring errors that can be found throughout the book, both in terms of grammar and biology. While you might say that, "Come on, Juan, it's a children's book anyway, and it's supposed to be somewhat of a fantasy." Well, I'm sorry, because I might have to call you out on that. See, the thing is, here in the Philippines, if you're going to publish a book and have it printed, it's going to need to at least be informative. That's a law around here. That's why people like me can only publish stories on Wattpad, since my works aren't exactly print-worthy. At least, according to Philippine laws anyway, which is actually fine by me. When I write, I mostly just write for fun. Same way, I guess, when I'm making videos. But okay, one of the errors I noticed at the beginning was that the story took place beneath the canopy of a banahaw tree. But then it goes on to say that Owl's nest sits atop the branches of a mango tree. Let's take a closer look, shall we? There are already a few errors at the start of the book alone. First off, there is a banahaw plant, but there is no banahaw tree. There is a mountain in the Philippines called Mount Banahaw, but again, there is no banahaw tree even there. Take note that this is just the first line. Second, we were supposed to be talking about things taking place beneath a banahaw tree, but then it stated that Owl has a nest situated on top of the branches of a mango tree. Wait a minute, did we just jump trees all of a sudden? This, as we can probably see, can be easily misunderstood by young readers, and why I probably wouldn't recommend it to them. Third, owls, as far as I know, don't build nests. Owls live inside the hollows of trees or burrows. Owls can also commandeer, or to put it simply, steal the nests of other birds, but they never build their own. I will also point out that the interaction between owl and parrot seems cute, but there is one main issue. Owls are nocturnal and are birds that only come out at night. Parrots, on the other hand, are diurnal and only come out at day. I actually like the interaction between characters, and it gives off a vibe of the Animals of Farthingwood by Colin Dan. I like the fact that the author was probably trying to point out that the two characters are like night and day, but she does nothing to further emphasize their differences. I think she could have made it so that Owl was a little sleepy whenever Parrot came to visit, but she never does so. Instead, we cut straight to their interactions, which make very little sense since both characters are supposed to be very different, which is how I interpret the scenes involving them. And yet, there's very little of that. They seem too similar. Now, there's a scene in the Lord of the Rings film trilogy where Gimli, the dwarf, sees all the armies of the enemy and says, "I can't believe I'm going to die side by side with an elf." But then Legolas, the elf, replies, "Then how about side by side with a friend?" Gimli turns to Legolas, a dwarf looks to an elf and solemnly says, I could do that." Granted, this scene was never included in the original novel trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, but it hammers home the idea of friendship formed in the most difficult and most dangerous of times. Sara Duterte could have included a similar scene in her book, perhaps Owl saying something like, "How can I survive the glare of day and the oppression of the sun?" And Parrot could reply, "Why, you can rest in the home of a friend and sleep in safety." But of course, that probably seems too much for her, I guess. Overall, the story feels largely unfinished, and Owl flying through the air with Parrot in the ending, but again, two things. Owls are again nocturnal and don't fly in daytime. Also, there's no final ending where the two birds manage to complete Owl's nest, and it's only hinted that they'll ever actually even get started. Hinting might work for older audiences, but with kids you'll have to be more obvious. Now the author states she already had a sequel planned, but the book has only about 8 pages and it could use a bit more. Some child psychologists out there might disagree with me, but I think 10 or 12 pages with an actual ending would have been a lot better. Last, and probably worst, is that it bears a resemblance to the works of American author Andy Runton in his Owly series. Now, the truth is that there really isn't anything original anymore. For instance, there's the fact that the Dark Lord Sauron of Lord of the Rings has gone on to influence a lot of other Dark Lords in fiction, like Lord Voldemort of Harry Potter, or even Abaddon the Despoiler from the Horus Heresy novels of Warhammer 40,000. Indeed, there are even your odd coincidences, such as again Lord Voldemort of Harry Potter being a little too similar to Orochimaru of the Naruto manga and anime, although both Rowling and Kishimoto deny the characters having anything to do with each other, save for that of fanfiction. And don't even start with the kind of fanfiction that you'll find out there these days. Sara Duterte insists that her ideas and story are based on her experiences, but I really can't shake the similarity between her work and that of Andy Runton. I will again go back to saying that she could have made it even more different and less likely to seem like it was plagiarized if she added more story and lore. But it is what it is, I guess. And the fact that this story seems unfinished is why I can't help but agree with many critics who have gone on to vilify the book and its author. See, one of the major gripes Filipinos have with Isang Kaibigan is that Sara Duterte demanded a budget from the Philippine Department of Education amounting to 10 million pesos to support the book's publication. For you non-Filipinos out there, 10 million pesos would equal to $178,762.92. You heard that. $178,762.92 worth of taxpayer money to publish her book and distribute it to schools all over the Philippines. What makes so many Filipinos angry about this is that she is demanding money from the Department of Education of the Philippines to fund her book, even though there are many public schools that can't even afford a proper classroom. Again, as I have stated, if the book had more story or lore and was presented in a different way, perhaps more Filipinos would probably be willing to accept it along with the Vice President's demands. However, that is clearly not the case, and I'm going to have to side with the book's many detractors. With the way it stands, it simply isn't worth the money the author is asking for. Also, one has to wonder why the Vice President couldn't publish it herself with her own money. I mean, she could if she wanted to. No one is really stopping her from doing so. Anyway, if you guys want something better, I do have something to offer. It's called Bastion, a story about anthropomorphic animals in a war-torn universe that features colossal spacecraft, walking tanks, robots, and elements of horror, science fiction, and fantasy, and it's coming to Wattpad real soon.